Just a 10-second, 30-second review on adult learner theory. I think not every program that's probably with us today are teaching adults. That's my background. And so that's the background of adult of essential education. We mainly are providing curriculum for adult education providers. But well, what do we know? We know adults want control, right? I mean, we all want control, I think. And I always kind of make the joke when I'm doing presentations that if I were to say, hey, if you could see a visual of my 10 points I'm going to make, and you could say, okay, well, I like point 4 and 5. I don't need those other ones, first ones, and I don't need those last ones. I just want to zero in on these two, these ones in the middle. You would do that and you would get rid of the rest, right? And that's what our students, our adult students want. They want that control. They want to be able to control the pace. They want to be able to potentially control the path, the relevance, and the environment. And so how can we give students more of that control and allow them to kind of make some of those decisions that make sense for them? We know as adult students get more motivation when they can be self-directed and they can direct their learning, and then they can tie that learning in to their purposes, their goals, and the things that they're trying to achieve. We know adults are busy, and when there's that lack of control, when there's that lack of self-directedness and that lack of connection to their purposes and their goals, they lose motivation and they lose the desire to stick around because, again, they've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got a lot of things they're juggling as adults. And so if they don't feel like they are moving towards their goals, their purposes, they're not going to stick around. And we do. Jason showed a slide that talked about the 6 anchors of student retention. We talk about that and this idea a lot. In that is that we need to continually connect students back to their specific and unique motivations, their goals, so that they feel like they're on track and obviously moving towards the things they want to achieve. And finally, if we can give more autonomy and give more control to our students, we know that it's going to increase that engagement. It's going to increase that persistence, as I was just saying, and it's ultimately going to increase their satisfaction with their learning and with the educational offerings they're being a part of. So let's continue this idea of student-directed kind of learning vis-a-vis teacher-directed. I did a little bit of a research review. I think we can all agree with what research generally shows is that if we can give students higher levels of autonomy, they're going to have this improved intrinsic motivation. There is going to be a deeper learning because they are the ones juggling and kind of moving in that space, trying to really make it work, make the learning work for them. And then there's going to be higher achievement. But as we know, if you see on my slides, the ... when paired with guidance, that's kind of the big thing that we're going to be getting into today is how can we give them as much autonomy as possible, but build it within the guidance that we can give them as, career experts in education, in guiding students towards credentialing. Students benefit when we can give them more choice over their goals, over their tasks, over their resources, the educational resources, their curriculum resources that we have available, and then ultimately the pacing. So ultimately, all that to say, the research is showing that the most effective model is often this idea of guided autonomy. Hey, I have these options. Our classroom and my experience as an educator over the last 20 years has showed me that these few ideas work really well. And so, John Doe, I want to kind of show you what these look like. And you can kind of then decide which one works best for you based on, your learning style, your kind of the time you have available. And ultimately, whether it's this online curriculum or it's this resource or it's that. And so I think helping kind of set that stage, give them context, give them an orientation of what is available, and then letting them go from there. So let's look more specifically at what this can look like for you all when it comes to technology and online curricula. So practical ways as we think about this. So there's a couple ideas. So can we give them an autonomy of a path or their pathways? How can we do that? So that can be as simple as providing optional pathways. That could be inside of one specific resource or one specific curriculum, or it could be, multiple resources, multiple curricula, and allowing them to kind of decide what works for them, as I kind of said before, and letting them select those resources. I don't know, again, in the chat, maybe you all can share if you do that. Do you kind of set students up and let them see a few options that you found successful or that other students have found successful, and then allow them to decide which they want to use. Is there anyone in the chat can give me a yes or no, I don't do that? I'd love to kind of get a little feedback on this. I'm kind of looking to see. Or it could also be inside of a specific text. It could be, and I'm going to show you an example from our product here, a way that there are multiple pathways and multiple options in one specific curriculum or resource. And then this idea of choice menus, this was something that I was kind of studying a little bit more. It could be, again, with a specific resource. Obviously, certain collaborative docs, Google Docs and slides and things like that allow educators to provide options and provide, again, menus or choices that allow students to kind of pick and choose the things that they want to work on. As I was doing some research and as I was thinking about this, there was a section of the menu or a section that says, hey, these are the required things, pick two. Here are some optional things, but I'd like you to pick one of these optional things. And so thinking through, are there platforms that support choices, support flexibility, support autonomy? Yeah, I see that. I see a couple people in the chat there talking about the choice menus, and it really is. Again, it's such a small thing, but I think the more that we can give students as a modicum of choice, if you have a hard time with that or you don't do a lot of that, that's a great way to start with providing them with some autonomy and providing a little bit more flexibility in kind of the directions that the students go. I think as Ryan and Brooke kind of mentioned there in the chat, it's just giving them some pathways, but you're curating that. You're kind of Jedi mind tricking them, saying, okay, whether they do this or this is ultimately getting them towards the goal that I want them to achieve. But you're kind of letting them, giving them that option or letting them think they have a choice, and they do. But ultimately, you've kind of framed it in the way that still works best for, again, their growth and what you understand as the expert. That's great. What about autonomy of pace? Again, with online curriculum, certain digital resources, there can be that. And so how can we allow students to progress faster or slower as needed? Again, we're going to have some students that are going to be on kind of a faster timeline. I like to kind of say fast track. Colleagues in Oklahoma that I used to work with, that's what we would say, or maybe slow down. We're going to have students that need to go slower, that are going to need to repeat, going to need to go back and look at things again. So is your classroom environment, does your space allow for students to do that? Do the resources and the things that you're giving them allow them to do that? And then maybe is there a way that students can see and can kind of track their progress? I think as we give them more autonomy, more direction, as they're able to make those choices, sometimes that follow-up skill of self-reflection, of self-monitoring isn't probably as developed, or sometimes isn't as developed. So finding resources that have visual progress, that have progress tracking dashboards, as I say there in the slide, can really help students see how they're doing. Hey, am I ahead of schedule? Am I behind schedule? Am I on track? Am I where I need to be based on the goal that I set? And I think one of the big things that I really like with this idea of providing guided autonomy is allowing students to see their progress, and maybe as the instructor or as the guide coming alongside, asking pointed questions to say, hey, well, I see you made a lot of progress. Like, how do you feel like you're doing? Do you feel like you understood these last 10 lessons that you just did? Or do you feel like you're on track? Or where do you feel like you're falling behind? And allowing them to, analyze and synthesize the progress that they're seeing and the things that they're thinking and feeling, and giving that back. I think that stopping and reflecting is such a huge piece that I think sometimes a lot of students miss because they just want to kind of keep moving ahead to the next thing in the name of, getting things done as quickly as possible. Autonomy of time and space, that's the beauty of, I think, the last probably 10 years in our space and probably in society, is that we've moved towards synchronous, asynchronous, we moved to blended, we moved to online structures that allow students to really expand their opportunity for learning. That's what I love about online curricula. Specifically for me, essential education is that students are able to kind of learn anywhere. When I worked for the state of Oklahoma, we would purchase online curricula with really one of our main kind of focuses was it's expanding access. We're allowing students to not just be tethered to this specific local offering of Mondays and Wednesdays from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m., but students now have the ability to kind of learn, anywhere at any time. Obviously, technology and kind of resource dependent there, but But going back to you and your classroom and your space is, what does that look like for you? How do you encourage both of these structures? Some sort of synchronous time where you get to interact with students, or students get to kind of hear from you as the expert, but also asynchronous models and structures where they get to kind of move at their pace, potentially, and kind of deciding what they want to get into. And that can be done obviously with going a little bit back to the choice menus, a list of those choices. Are there things that make more sense in an asynchronous format of, hey, here are some things I want you to take a look at. Take a look at 2 of these 5 things that I've listed. I'd like you to get those done before we see each other again in person next week. So allowing them to kind of have some flexibility, but again, giving them that guidance if and when needed. And finally here, autonomy of goals. We need our students to reflect, to really think deeply, and then articulate for themselves and for us as program staff and educators what these goals are. I don't think any student, you all correct me if I'm wrong, there are some very specific programs. Let's say Tabor CASAS, those are 2 of the larger tests, but I don't know if any specific student comes into your program and is it before they know the words Tabor CASAS, come to you and say, hey, I'm looking to make a gain in this specific assessment. I probably shouldn't use those specific ones by name, but you get the idea where I kind of come from. Those were very important to me as a state kind of program leader, but those weren't necessarily as important to a student. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was, hey, I want to increase my understanding of the English language so I can do this, this, and this. I want to get a diploma. That's a lot of times that's what they'd say. I want to get my GED, and we'd have to really kind of suss out, well, why is that? What is really that next step beyond that? But really allowing the students to kind of come up with their large goals, but then the specific learning targets inside of that, knowing that that big goal is sometimes this big thing that they can't take in all at once. So how do we then help them come up with those smaller pieces, but then allow them to kind of maybe pick the ones that they want to pick? And then again, going back to that idea of that reflection and those weekly check-ins, we've got to figure out how we can assist students. That's probably the one way I think we can really intervene and be a lot more hands-on with our students, is getting them to reflect, to synthesize, to do a check-in, and really kind of look back and think, where am I at? Where have I been, and what do I need to kind of retool or tinker with as I move forward, so I don't kind of miss a lot of key things as I continue to make my journey forward towards those goals. And so how does Essential Ed specifically do this? We've kind of set the stage with, we want to provide autonomy. We need to provide autonomy. We know it provides more motivation and persistence and satisfaction. Again, Jason mentioned this new offering that we have called Practice Plus. We have it for GED and HiSET. And what I love about it is that it provides 3 distinct pathways. There's this kind of the bread and butter of what our product is we can create this diagnostic learning plan that students can kind of follow that pathway. For those teachers that want to be more hands-on and provide more of a curated pathway, we have assignments, and teachers can assign a very specific path and list of things they could want students to do. And then we have student-directed review. We have a place where students can go and find the list of all the lessons, and then they can go specifically to the things they know they need to work on. And specifically with Practice Plus, Jason was mentioning all the different types of learners that it makes sense for. But for those that are near passers, when we think about HSE credentialing, GED, HiSET specifically, a lot of times students, after they've done a practice test, or maybe they've taken a test and they're coming back and they just need to kind of tune up a couple of areas, they know what those are. And so rather than waiting for the teacher to assign something, or maybe looking and trying to find a specific place in a book, students can go to this list and find those specific things they need to work on and just get started kind of at their own discretion. And so that's one of the things I love about Practice Plus specifically is kind of those 3 very distinct pathways that allow for that flexibility and really for some of that autonomy to take place. Also with Practice Plus, as Jason mentioned, it's practice, but there is some instruction, and it really allows the student to decide how much practice do I want? And after each question, how much instructional review do I want to watch to kind of understand that question that I just tried to do and maybe got correct or incorrect. And so it really allows the student to set the pace and set the tone for how much do I want to keep doing and repeating and trying again versus with all these practice sets, and then how much again, instruction do I need versus kind of just practice. I think it puts that in the hands of the learner, which I really love. And then finally, if you've never seen essential education, we have a lot of places that we have visual progress, visual dashboards that show students in a lot of different ways how they're doing. Are they on track, whether it's with study time or moving towards their goals with practice tests and time remaining and those type of things. And so it really allows the students to implement a lot of the things that kind of we've been talking about over the last 15 or 20 minutes. And so I want to finish with showing you one quick visual of what Practice Plus looks like, just so you can see those pathways that I was mentioning. I'm going to reshare my screen just so you can see this from a learner perspective here. You can see this. So this is the student homeroom. You see the learning plan, which is kind of that pathway number one. This is what was created based on the student's initial diagnostic assessment. This assignment's here. You see here, it's saying, hey, this was the teacher assigned this. And you can see my very explicit note. Hey, on Friday, December 12th, I want you to get this done. And then the next assignment says, you're going to take a practice test. And it lets the student know this is specifically what I want you to do, when I want you to do it. And the student sees that. And then that review, we have that student-directed pathway where students can take a look at what the system is saying. They recommend review, whether it's here with these lessons or the specific workbook pages. And then they can come down to where it says choose a lesson, and they can find a specific thing they need to work on and go straight into that specific question and pop it up and go in and practice that. And so I think whether it's essential education or something else, obviously we want it to be essential education, but figuring out how can I give more autonomy to students? How can I allow them to figure out what works best for them so that you're not putting them through the paces of something they don't want or need and allowing them to direct that path. But again, doing that in a guided way.